Good evening, dear congregants. Today I stand before you to explore the profound intersection of the teachings of Martin Buber, a prominent Jewish philosopher, and the fascinating realm of artificial intelligence. In a world increasingly dominated by technology, it is essential to reflect upon how we can maintain meaningful connections with one another and with the world around us. Martin Buber's philosophy offers valuable insights into the importance of genuine human interactions, which we must preserve as we navigate the age of AI. How was that for an opening? It wasn't mine. What you heard was what ChatGPT came up with when I asked it to write a sermon on Martin Buber and artificial intelligence. Based on these words, I'm not terribly concerned that AI will become the go-to approach for rabbinic divrei Torah, but I do agree with ChatGPT that there is a profound intersection between I and thou and artificial intelligence. What's more, I think that intersection can help us to lead better and more fulfilling lives. So that's what I want to talk about with you tonight. The descendant of some of the greatest of Jewish scholars, Martin Buber had a literary career as one of the first major collectors of Hasidic stories and as a pioneering translator of the Bible. His religious influences included Eastern philosophy as well as Christianity and Judaism. He was a committed Zionist, and when it became impossible for a Jew to live in Germany, he made Aliyah in 1937 to teach at Hebrew University, and remained in Israel until his death in 1965. 2023 is the centennial of the publication of the book for which he is best known, I and Thou. The title in English is an unfortunate one, having to do with a difference between English and German. Zeke, we'll have you come and talk about this in a minute. Like many languages, German has two forms of the pronoun you, a formal one that you use with people you aren't close with, and a familiar one you use with family and friends. In the book title, Buber used the familiar form du, that is in the book title in German. English once had these two versions. You was the formal term, and thou was the familiar one. However, that changed a long time ago, and whatever thou makes you think of, it certainly is not a familiar relationship. Since Buber was such a gifted translator, I think he'd approve of my using the word you in place of thou when talking about the contents of the book. As those of us who heard Rabbi Dennis Ross speak about I and thou at our temple know, Buber suggests that we have two types of relationships. The first is I and it. That's when I use something else as an object. That something else can be a person. For instance, I go to the supermarket. I'm using the clerk at the register to make my purchases, and they're using me to earn their paycheck. It's why it's so easy for the stores to replace them with self-serve checkouts. When my children were living at home, I would ask them to do chores. It rarely worked, but I asked them anyway. And when they did, that was another I-it interaction. An I-it interaction doesn't have to be with a person, however. If I watch an instructional video or read a book to learn more information, those are versions of I and it. They are major parts of our lives, and there's nothing wrong with I and it, as far as things go. But Buber says that things can go farther. There can be moments in a relationship where I have no goal. I'm just in connection. I might notice that the cashier looks a bit sad, and because nobody's in line behind me, I ask if they want to talk. And during the conversation, I might forget anything except sharing their story. Or one of my children and I might just be in a special moment together. Buber calls those interactions I and you. You and I simply connect with no analysis, no effort. Those moments are rare, but they're precious. One day, a few years ago, I was rehearsing the 10th graders for their confirmation ceremony. It was all going as usual. I was making sure that they knew their cues, that they were enunciating clearly and making eye contact, that their Torah reading was coming along, that their speeches hung together. One of our confirmands started reading her speech, which I had not seen. She talked about how one thing she had learned that year was that she hadn't always been the older sister she wanted to be. She used her speech to apologize to her younger sibling and to promise to do better. I really didn't recall having taught anything that would have led to this insight, but it didn't matter. I wasn't focused on her posture or her enunciation or her choice of words. Neither were the other students. We were just taking this in, sharing in this important moment in her life that was now an important moment in ours. Each of us had an IU moment. If I and thou was a century old, artificial intelligence showed up for most of us just this past year. While students of technology have known about it for a while, it burst on the larger consciousness on November 30th when ChatGPT released a demo version. People quickly saw that they could ask questions and get intelligible and respectably written answers. Within 5 days, it had attracted over 1 million users. Other bots, such as DALL-E and Midjourney, generate images in response to prompts. As AI entered our world, so did controversies about its use. Some see its potential to make our lives better. In a natural disaster, AI-guided robots can find and rescue people who are trapped in ways that would be unsafe for human teams. AI can assist in complex medical procedures, such as radiosurgery. It can make sense out of weather patterns, thus helping protect people. In other words, the sky is the limit for the benefits of this new technology. On the other hand, AI has generated its fair share of worry. Concerns range from students turning to AI to avoid writing essays, to malign forces using AI-generated images to influence political behavior. Indeed, earlier this very week, it was reported that China is using AI to sow discord in America by spreading conspiracy theories about the wildfires that devastated Hawaii this summer. Neurologist Eric Howell has written that the Microsoft chat box Bing really does herald a global threat, and that we need to panic about AI and imagine the worst-case scenario. Whether AI will turn out to be a miracle or a monster or some combination of the two is not something that I feel qualified to answer. I doubt that anyone truly is. But I do know that Martin Buber's insights in I and thou are profoundly needed in our world today. We are dying from lack of connections to each other. That's not hyperbole. We are literally dying. Rabbi Ed Feinstein has reported that Vivek Murthy, the former Surgeon General of the United States, surveyed the latest data to determine what was the most serious threat to public health in this country. He assumed that it would be cancer or heart disease or diabetes or obesity or addiction. Instead, he discovered that the most serious public health problem is loneliness. In a national study, 36% of Americans reported persistent feelings of loneliness. 54% of Americans say no one knows them well. 40% report that they lack companionship, that their relationships aren't meaningful, and that they feel isolated from others. Dr. Murthy concludes that loneliness is as bad for you physically as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. I am not suggesting that we have an easy cure for loneliness and its deleterious effects on physical and psychological health. I am saying that we owe it to ourselves, each other, and our world to increase the opportunities for true IU connections, for moments of real relationships. And so I'd like to look at artificial intelligence through that lens in 3 particular contexts. In so doing, I'm hoping that we can see ways that we can use AI to further true connections. And I'm hoping that we can also see ways where we have to be cautious about its capacity to limit those connections. The first context is in our building a relationship with AI itself. That's not as strange as it sounds. In Israel, the director of the Patent Office commissioned an opinion about whether an artificial intelligence robot could be awarded a patent for an invention. The Jewish Law Division looked at various Jewish sources for analogies. It came up with comparisons to fruits, pigeons, honey, fish, servants, dividends, and interest. In the end, it concluded that from a halachic perspective, the creator of an AI, rather than the AI itself, would deserve the patent. And the patent office went along with this recommendation. My first thought was that only in Israel would you have a Jewish law division within the government patent office. My second is that this will hardly be the last word on the subject. The Israeli effort is part of an international one to regard AI as an autonomous entity. The person driving it is an inventor named Stephen Thaler, who claims that his AI device uses a chaining of conceptual hives resembling the formation of a series of memories. Translated, that means it's sort of human. And as you have more conversations with your bot, you can begin to sense that maybe you can develop some kind of relationship. Buber adds that just as I and it can be a relationship between me and something inanimate, so can I and you. He talks about being in the woods and having a connection with trees. He considers the various ways people typically look at a tree. They think about what species it is, how its branches move, and so on. And then he says, but it can also happen, if will and grace are joined, that as I contemplate the tree, I am drawn into a relationship, and the tree ceases to be an it. If AI can help us understand that we can be in a deep relationship with anything in the world, it can expand our consciousness in a valuable way. Yet AI has certain limits when it comes to establishing a true I and you relationship. A person can't go around looking for an I and you relationship. Rather, they just have to train themselves to be open to the possibility that such a relationship can happen. As Buber writes, the you encounters me by grace. It cannot be found by seeking. But we connect to AI precisely by asking it questions and looking for answers. In other words, we use AI as an it. The second context for considering artificial intelligence that I'd like to mention is as a source of information. One of the first things anyone understands about the Jewish people is that we value learning. Learning builds you up. It strengthens you. And AI makes learning easy. ChatGPT will never tell you that you're asking a stupid question. Knowing more and feeling empowered to learn can help you realize what matters. And when you do, you'll be open to the possibility of deeper relationships because you'll understand why they're so important. And yet, AI learning can also diminish a feeling of relationship. We can go back to the beginning of our modern era of knowledge, the invention of the printing press. Rabbi Chaim ben Betzalel, who lived in the 16th century, said that learning by reading isn't as powerful, as significant, as real as learning directly from a teacher. And in I and Thou itself, Buber writes, or he states, to be sure, the individual can replace direct experience more and more with indirect experience, the acquisition of information. We have to remember that whatever information we acquire, it must be in service of opening us up for relationships, for direct experience, not of substituting for them. Finally, as we think about artificial intelligence, it's helpful to remember what it says on the new High Holy Day Torah cover we obtained. Hayom Harat Olam. This is the birthday of the world. On Rosh Hashanah, we celebrate the miracle of creation. And the miracle did not happen only 5,784 years ago as we count in Jewish time, or only billions of years ago as we count in scientific time. It continues whenever the sun rises. The prayer we say each morning reminds us of that. Uvtuvo mechadesh b'chol yom tamid ma'aseh v'reshit. In God's goodness, God renews the work of creation every day. Just as God continues to create the world, so do we continue to fill it with creative energy. Human creativity is an expression of our godlikeness, wrote Rabbi Norman Lamb many decades ago. When primitive people rubbed two stones together and produced a spark, they were not displacing God's creation of light and fire. They were exercising their divinely ordained vocation of creativity for enhancing the material world by use of their talents, and were thereby imitating God, who said, "Let there be light." In this sense, when humanity created AI, we were imitating God, just as we did when we figured out how to use fire. But there are less positive examples in Jewish lore of human attempts to imitate God. I referred to Rabbi Chaim ben Betzalel. Rabbi Chaim had a brother, Rabbi Judah Loew, the Maharal of Prague. He is known to us from the legend of the Golem. As the story goes, he created a creature to protect the Jewish community from the blood libel. Eventually, something went wrong, and the Golem went on a rampage. With difficulty, the Maharal was able to neutralize it. Again, AI can be like harnessing fire, or it can be like releasing a golem into the world. We don't know yet which one will be the better analogy. But what I and Thou teaches is that the best way of imitating God is to open ourselves up to relationships that have moments of pure connection. Buber explains that God is all of those connections. We can never use God. We just relate to God. And we do so by relating to each other. As he puts it, extended, the lines of relationship intersect in the eternal you. Every single you is a glimpse of that. Each time we have an I and you relationship, we glimpse God, the eternal you. On this, the centennial of I and Thou, may we use the newest of technologies to make this old idea new again. May we create true connections among ourselves, moments when we lose our judginess and our calculation and find relationship. If artificial intelligence can help us do that, it will have lived up to its promise. Ken Yehi Ratzon, be this God's will.